Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell this story. When people talk about childhood horror, they usually mean the kind that came from scary movies or shadows in the closet. But mine was different. Mine wasn't about monsters or ghosts. It was about my mother. Her name was Lorraine Holt, though most people in town just called her Lori. If you ask the neighbors, they'd tell you she was a hard-working single mom trying to make ends meet. And sure, on the outside, that's what it looked like. She worked at a local diner, always had her hair pinned up tight, and walked with that sharp-heeled confidence that made people believe she had her life together. But behind closed doors, she was someone else. Someone mean. Someone who knew exactly where to cut when she wanted to hurt you. I was 9 years old when the worst day happened, the day I thought she was going to die right in front of me. But to understand why that day was so burned into my head, you need to know how things were with her. Lorraine wasn't the type of mom who hugged you goodnight or asked how school went. She was the type who'd yank the blanket off your bed at 5 a.m. and say, "Get your lazy ass up, the world doesn't wait for nobodies." She was the type who'd pick apart everything you did, how you held a fork, how you walked, how you looked at her. Don't slouch. You look weak. Speak up, for God's sake, people will think you're slow. Quit crying. Tears don't pay bills, that was her rhythm. Sharp words, sharper looks. My dad wasn't in the picture. He left when I was a toddler. From the bits I picked up, he and Lorraine fought like dogs, and one night he just never came back. She never let me ask about him. If I so much as said, "Did Dad?" she'd slam her hand on the counter and cut me off. "Don't you dare bring him up in this house. He's a ghost, dead to us." So it was just me and her. And sometimes that was the scariest part of all. The day it happened started out ordinary. It was a Saturday morning in the middle of May, warm enough that the air already had that sticky feel by 9 a.m. Lorraine had woken me up yelling about laundry. "Jesus Christ, Tyler, do I have to do every goddamn thing in this house? You can't even remember to switch the clothes to the dryer. What are you, useless?" I was still rubbing sleep out of my eyes. I forgot last night. I'm sorry. Sorry, don't put clean pants on your ass," she snapped, slamming the washer lid. "Hurry up, I gotta get cash out before we hit the strip by the strip." She meant the row of discount stores out on Briarwood Avenue. That was her idea of a weekend outing. Half shopping trip, half scavenger hunt for deals. And of course I had to tag along, whether I wanted to or not. We drove her old Pontiac, windows cracked because the AC barely worked. Lorraine had one hand on the wheel, the other fishing in her purse for a pack of Newports. "You think money grows on trees?" she asked, lighting up. Smoke filled the car, stinging my eyes. "I bust my ass all week and you act like the world owes you candy and toys." "I didn't ask for toys," I muttered. "What's that?" "Nothing." "Better be nothing," she said, exhaling a stream of smoke that hit me in the face. That was her style, turning little moments into lectures. I kept quiet the rest of the ride. We stopped at the First National Bank ATM before the stores. It sat on the corner of a quiet block, just a squat little kiosk with a security camera above it. Lorraine parked right up front, killed the engine, and got out. "Stay close," she ordered, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I trailed behind, bored and half-tuned out while she punched buttons on the machine. The sun was beating down, and I was tracing shapes in the dust with my sneaker when something caught my eye. Just a few steps away, at the edge of the sidewalk where the bank wall turned a sharp corner, I saw it. A face. A man's face peeking around the corner, wide-eyed, unblinking, staring straight at my mother. I froze. His eyes were strange, too focused, too hungry. And then, just as quick, he pulled back. Gone. "Mom," I whispered. "Not now, Tyler. I'm busy." She didn't even look at me. "No, Mom, there's—" I said, "Not now." Her voice was tight. I bit my lip, looking back at the corner. For a moment it was empty, and I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was just daydreaming. But then he was there again. Same face. Same wide stare. My heart kicked into overdrive. "Mom, I'm serious. There's a man—" She sighed hard, buttoning up her purse. "Christ almighty, what now? You're always making up stories." She turned to look just as the man stepped fully into view. He wasn't a shadow. He wasn't in my head. He was real. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a ratty gray hoodie with the hood up. His face was sharp, dirty with stubble all along his jaw, and he was coming straight at us. Lorraine's eyes widened for a split second, fear flashing across her face like lightning. But she didn't even have time to move. His fist came out of nowhere and cracked her across the jaw. The sound was sickening, a dull thwack that echoed against the ATM wall. She crumpled instantly, her purse slipping from her grip as she hit the pavement. "Mom!" I screamed, dropping to my knees. Blood was already dribbling from her mouth, staining her white blouse. Before I could touch her, the man's shadow loomed over me. He yanked me up by the collar of my shirt, his face inches from mine. His breath reeked of cigarettes and something sour. "Shut the fuck up," he roared. I froze, tears streaming down my face, my whole body shaking. He let me go, snatched up my mom's purse, and just walked off. Not ran. Walked. Like he'd just bought a cup of coffee. I knelt by Lorraine, screaming her name. "Mom! Mom, wake up!" Her eyes were closed, her chest rising and falling in these awful, ragged gasps that sounded like snoring. Only it wasn't snoring. It was something wrong. Something broken. "Help!" I cried to the empty street. "Somebody help!" What happened after is mostly a blur. A woman in a blue dress ran over, crouched down beside us, telling me, "It's okay, honey, she's breathing." Another man called 911. Sirens came. Strangers circled around, their voices overlapping. Too many words I couldn't make sense of. All I knew was that my mom wasn't moving. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of her. I was scared for her. She survived. Somehow. By that evening, she was home again with a swollen jaw and a few stitches. She never talked about it, not once. But me? I never forgot the look in her eyes right before he hit her. That flicker of raw fear. Because for once, Lorraine Holt wasn't the one in control. And even though she lived, that day burned into me forever. Some kids are haunted by monsters under their beds. I was haunted by the sound of my mother hitting the pavement.
Story 2.
I grew up in a church-going family in upstate New York. Sundays were never optional in our house. Rain or shine, sick or healthy, the Parkers were in a pew by 10:30 a.m., sharp. My dad, Richard, wore the same navy blazer every week, crisp white shirt and red tie. My mom, Linda, sat beside him, her Bible clutched neatly on her lap, smiling at the neighbors and humming along to the hymns. My little sister, Emily, and I would fidget in our pressed clothes, whispering jokes to each other until Dad's glare silenced us. It wasn't a bad childhood. In fact, most people would have called it privileged. Dad was a vice president at a mid-tier software company in Albany. The dot-com boom had been very good to him. He cashed in stock options at just the right time, which meant we lived comfortably in a colonial-style house with a big yard and 2 cars in the driveway. Mom never had to work a day in her life. But never had to work isn't quite right. She worked plenty. She cooked, she cleaned, she kept the whole household afloat. More than that, she was there. All the time. Mom was the kind of woman who woke up at 6 a.m. to pack our lunches with little handwritten notes inside. She baked cookies on Fridays, decorated the house every holiday, and never missed a single school concert or soccer game. My friends envied me. I heard it all the time. "Man, I wish my mom was like yours." And I believed them. I believed we had it good. The only crack in the picture-perfect facade was Dad. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't physically abusive or the kind of guy who flew into drunken rages. He was the opposite. Cold, calculated, buttoned up to the point of obsession. His shoes were polished every night, his shirts ironed to razor edges, his desk at home sterile and spotless. He'd correct your grammar mid-sentence, lecture you for chewing too loudly, and if you dared to laugh at the wrong time in church, you'd get the death stare. It wasn't until I was in my late teens that the truth came out. Dad was involved in things far darker than any of us knew. I won't dredge up every detail, but the day he was arrested, everything shattered. The trial was all over the local papers. Reporters camped outside our house. Neighbors whispered. The betrayal cut deep. I was stunned. Emily was heartbroken. And Mom tried to shield us. She tried to be the rock. She divorced him, walked away, and got a massive settlement, enough to keep us financially secure forever. We downsized to a smaller house, but we never went without. Emotionally, though, that was another story. Years passed. By the time I was pushing 30, I had my own place on the other side of town. Emily was still at home, though. She'd graduated high school and decided to take a year off before college, working part-time, figuring out what she wanted. Mom had sold the family home and bought a small 2-bedroom bungalow. It was cozy, sure, but too cramped for 2 grown women. They bickered constantly. I remember one night Emily called me. "Alex, she's losing it." "What do you mean?" I asked, half asleep on my couch. "She just screamed at me because I said I was thinking about moving out." "Well, I mean, it is a small house." "No, Alex. You don't get it. She called me a selfish little bitch. Mom, our mom. She cursed at me." I sat up. "What? No way. Mom doesn't swear. I'm telling you she did." She looked me right in the eye and said it. I didn't know what to say. The harshest word I'd ever heard my mom use was, "Dang it." The idea of her spitting venom at Emily didn't compute. "Maybe she's just stressed," I offered weakly. "Stress doesn't make you call your daughter a bitch." I let it go, thinking it was just tension from living in close quarters. But Emily was right. That was the first crack in the facade. Weeks later, the phone call came that changed everything. It was a beautiful June afternoon. Melissa, my girlfriend at the time, and I were walking through 5 Rivers Nature Preserve. Birds chirping, sun filtering through the trees, her hand warm in mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Private number. "Spam," Melissa said. "Don't answer." But something in my gut said otherwise. "Hello? Is this Alex Parker?" a man's voice asked. "Yeah. This is Officer Jameson with the Albany Police Department. I'm calling regarding your mother, Linda Parker." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "She was arrested earlier today for assault." I laughed nervously. "No, you've got the wrong person. My mom doesn't." She broke another woman's arm during an altercation. When we attempted to detain her, she assaulted one of our officers. I froze. My brain rejected the words. No, that's not possible. My mom doesn't even." He calmly listed her name, address, physical description. Every detail matched. What do I do? Bail? Lawyer? "Sir, your mother has been remanded under the New York State mental hygiene law. She's being transferred to a secure psychiatric facility for evaluation. Bail does not apply." The world tilted. I sat hard on a bench, Melissa rubbing my back as I struggled to breathe. That was the moment everything changed. A week later, the hospital let her call. "Alex? Mom? Oh my God, are you okay? Do you need anything? I've been so worried." Her voice was eerily calm. "I need you to do something for me. Anything. Find the cop who arrested me. Officer Jameson, badge number 437. Spit in his face for disrespecting your mother." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Her calm tone snapped into a piercing shriek. "Spit on him!" The sound made me rip the phone from my ear. I'd never heard her scream like that, not even close. "Mom, please." She hung up. The first visit with Emily was worse. The hospital smelled like bleach and despair. Locked doors buzzed open. Nurses in scrubs walked briskly past. My chest felt like it was caving in. When we entered her room, she was sitting quietly on the bed, hands folded. For a split second, I thought maybe the staff had exaggerated. Then she saw me. "You didn't do it," she hissed. "Didn't do what?" "You didn't spit on him. You're weak, just like your father. Mom, please." She lunged. Emily screamed. Orderlies rushed in. They pinned her down as she thrashed, snarling like a rabid animal. That wasn't my mom. That wasn't the woman who raised me. The months that followed were brutal. Emily and I leaned on each other. We visited, we listened to doctors, we sat through endless meetings. The diagnosis, acute psychotic break. Years of suppressed stress, trauma from Dad's implosion, compounded by isolation. Without treatment, she'd spiraled into paranoia and violence. Medication, therapy, patience. That was the prescription. It was a long climb. Some days she was lucid, sweet, almost her old self. Other days she was venomous, hateful, spitting out words I never thought I'd hear from her mouth. But slowly, painfully slowly, she improved. One day, nearly a year later, I visited her and she smiled at me. A real smile. The kind that lit up her face the way it used to when she pulled cookies out of the oven. I cried. She'll never be exactly the same. None of us will. But she came back. And that's the scariest part. Mental illness can turn the sweetest, safest person in your world into a monster, and you'll never see it coming.
Story 3.
I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than the truth. My mom, Lorraine, always had this way of making herself look like the perfect mother to outsiders. But behind closed doors, she could be sharp, cold, and sometimes downright cruel. I'd learned early on that emotions were treated like weaknesses in our house. If you were sad, you were dramatic. If you were scared, you were imagining things. And if you were angry, well, anger was Mom's domain, nobody else's. Still, even with all of her toxic traits, I could never shake the fact that she was my mother. And when she told me what happened to her a few weeks ago, her voice breaking in a way I had never heard before, I realized something. Whatever mask she usually wore had shattered that day. What she went through was real, terrifyingly real, and in her own way, she was still struggling to process it. It was a late Saturday afternoon, a sticky kind of spring day where the air in Charleston, South Carolina hung thick with humidity. Mom had been helping with the kitchen renovation at our house. Well, helping mostly meant bossing everyone around. But that day she needed to grab some small tools and supplies. She decided to head down to Clayton's Hardware and Appliance, a big box type store just 10 minutes from home. "Don't take forever," Dad had said, wiping sweat off his forehead as he wrestled with the cabinets. "Relax, Greg," Mom had shot back, tossing her purse over her shoulder. "I'll be back before you're even done swearing at those hinges." I remembered laughing a little. Classic Mom, sarcastic, sharp, but I had no clue what was about to unfold when she left the house. Mom parked her old Honda near the far end of the lot, the only spot open close to the garden section. She hated parking out there. It meant a long walk. Still, she grabbed her reusable bag, locked the doors, and started heading toward the entrance. That's when she noticed it. Footsteps behind her, a little too close. At first, she brushed it off. "It's just somebody rushing inside, no big deal," she told herself. But that uneasy feeling, the one that tightens your stomach before your brain even catches up, had already taken root. Once she got through the automatic doors, she made her way toward the tool aisle. She could still feel eyes on her. "Ma'am, can I help you find something?" A young employee in a green apron smiled as she passed. "Oh, I'm fine, thanks," Mom replied politely, her eyes flicking sideways. That's when she saw him. A man, mid-50s maybe, scruffy beard, greasy gray hair sticking out from under a ball cap. His clothes looked like they'd been slept in for a week. Jeans stiff with dirt, a faded plaid shirt. But it wasn't the clothes that made her uneasy. It was his face. Wide-eyed. Too intent. Mom told me later. It wasn't just that he looked homeless or whatever. It was the way he looked at me. Like I wasn't a person, just something he wanted. She turned down an aisle, pretending to look at drill bits. From the corner of her eye, she saw him pause at the end of the row, standing there, watching. Her throat tightened. "All right, Lorraine, don't lose it," she muttered under her breath. She decided to test it. She went 2 aisles over, pretending to check out sandpaper. Within a minute, there he was again. Same distance, same stare. She picked up her pace, weaving through the store, doubling back a few times. Each time, he followed. Finally, she whispered to herself, "Nope, I'm not doing this." She headed straight toward the service desk. "Excuse me," she said quickly to the young clerk at the counter, a red-headed girl barely out of high school. "There's a man who's been following me around the store. He's over there." Mom pointed discreetly, but when she looked, the man had suddenly turned and walked away. The clerk frowned. "Do you want me to call a manager? We can keep an eye out." Mom sighed, feeling silly. "Maybe I'm overreacting, but yes, please. Just have someone watch." The girl nodded. "Of course, ma'am. You're not overreacting." Mom forced a smile and thanked her. She lingered in the store another 15 minutes, deliberately taking her time, checking her phone, glancing around. Nothing. No sign of him. By the time she checked out, she felt better. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe the guy was just wandering. But as she pushed her cart through the sliding doors, the hot evening air wrapping around her, that feeling returned. Worse than before. Mom was maybe 10 steps outside the store when her gut screamed. She turned her head slightly, and there he was. The same man, standing near the sidewalk, pretending to look at a row of grills on display. Only, he wasn't looking at the grills. He was looking at her. Mom's heart jumped into her throat. She quickened her pace, gripping her keys tight in her hand. She still had at least 200 yards to reach her car, parked far out near the garden section. She began walking faster. So did he. Every time she sped up, he matched it. Every time she slowed, he slowed. His footsteps stayed just far enough back to blend in, but close enough that she could feel his presence pressing on her spine. "Jesus, Jesus, help me," she whispered under her breath. By the time she reached the halfway mark, she swore she could hear him breathing. Mom debated whether to scream, to sprint, or to swing her keys like a weapon. Her fingers trembled. Just as the panic peaked, headlights swept across the lot. A white pickup truck turned down her row. Mom didn't think. She just reacted. She threw her arms in the air and waved. "Hey! Hey!" The truck slowed. The driver, a middle-aged man with sunglasses propped on his head, rolled down the window. "Ma'am, you all right?" The man following Mom froze. For the first time, he looked caught. He turned on his heel and walked quickly away, disappearing between 2 rows of cars. Mom nearly collapsed with relief. She hurried toward the truck. "Thank God," she gasped. "That man, he was following me. He was right behind me." The driver glanced past her, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, I saw him. He was way too close. You did the right thing flagging me down." Her hands shook as she clutched her cart. He was gonna grab me. I could feel it." The driver's face was grim. "Ma'am, you don't know how lucky you are. There was a woman snatched in the same area last month. Still hasn't been found." Her stomach dropped. "Oh my God." "Go ahead and get in your car," the man urged. "I'll wait here till you drive off." She nodded quickly, tears stinging her eyes. She shoved the cart aside, unlocked her Honda, and climbed in. The whole time her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She locked the doors, started the engine, and drove away as fast as she could. When she got home, Dad was still cursing at the cabinets, completely oblivious. "You were gone forever," he said, without looking up. Mom just stood there, pale and trembling. "Greg, I almost didn't come back." He looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cracked. "Some man followed me. All through the store out to the lot. He was right on me. If that truck hadn't pulled up..." Dad dropped the screwdriver. For once, he didn't argue or roll his eyes. He just grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her close. I overheard everything from the hallway, and for the first time in my life, I heard my mother cry. Not angry tears, not manipulative tears, but raw, terrified sobs. Since that night, Mom refuses to shop alone. If Dad can't go, she won't go. She still talks about the way that man's footsteps matched hers, the way he blended just enough to seem harmless but close enough to strike. She's still Mom, still toxic in plenty of ways, still sharp-tongued, still controlling. But I can see the shadow of that day on her face, and I can't help but think, if that truck had been 5 seconds later, if the driver hadn't been paying attention, if Mom hadn't waved her arms, I might be telling this story very differently. Because sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask. Sometimes it's just a man in a dirty shirt, waiting for the right moment. And sometimes the only thing standing between life and death is whether a stranger decides to slow their truck.
Story 4.
I grew up in a small Northern California town in the early 1980s, a place that felt sleepy and ordinary on the surface, but was filled with the kinds of neighbors that could either watch over you like family or make your skin crawl without you really knowing why. I was just 3 years old when most of this started. At that age, you don't know what danger looks like. You don't even know what evil is. You only know the sound of laughter, the comfort of your mom's arms, or the sting of getting scolded when you've pushed your luck too far. But my mother did know. She had worked for the sheriff's department before I was born, interviewing criminals, taking notes on cases, and speaking to people who had done things most folks don't even want to imagine. She had this instinct about people, this radar for when something wasn't right. That radar saved me. We lived on a dead-end street in a modest neighborhood, the kind of place where every front yard had patches of dandelions, where people left their garage doors half open on weekends while working on cars, and where kids played until the streetlights blinked on. Across the street lived an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Barlow. Mrs. Barlow was a short, round woman with a thick drawl that didn't quite fit Northern California. Sounded more like she'd come from Oklahoma or Arkansas. She loved her cats, and when I say loved, I mean she had at least a dozen of them sprawled across her driveway, porch, and even the roof of her beat-up Ford. She also kept birds, rows of cages out back filled with parakeets, finches, and oddly enough, quail. Whenever she cleaned the cages, the sour stench would drift across the street, and my mom would wrinkle her nose, muttering, "Lord, that woman needs a stronger stomach." Mr. Barlow was a different story. Tall, thin, always in old jeans and a belt that seemed too tight. He didn't smile the way neighbors usually do. He'd look at me too long, like I was some puzzle piece he wanted to figure out. To my 3-year-old self, he just seemed like another grown-up. But to my mother, he set off alarm bells. She never said exactly what tipped her off. Maybe it was his tone, maybe it was the way his eyes lingered. But she never trusted him around me. Early memories. I can still recall standing at the edge of our yard, watching Mrs. Barlow scatter birdseed, the cats weaving around her ankles. I wanted so badly to go over there, to see the bright yellow finches and the funny little quail pecking in the dirt. "Mom, can I go?" I'd beg. She'd glance over and her voice would go firm. "Not with him there. You can wave from here." Sometimes, when Mr. Barlow wasn't around, she'd let me cross the street. I remember toddling across, gripping a popsicle stick in one hand and being ushered into their living room where the smell of cat litter mixed with bird feathers. Mrs. Barlow would hand me a cookie and ask me questions in her slow, drawling voice. But the moment Mr. Barlow came through the door, my mom's tone changed. "Time to come back, honey," she'd say, sharp and final. I'd pout. "But I want to see the birds." "Not now." "Come on." Her instincts never wavered. The creepy invite one memory still makes my stomach twist. I was playing on our front steps when Mr. Barlow strolled over, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He squatted down to my level, his face just inches from mine. "You can come on back with me," he said in this low, coaxing tone. "I got something neat to show you." Before I could even react, my mother's voice cut through the air like a whip. "She's not going anywhere with you, Bill." I didn't understand then, but I remember how tight her grip was on my arm when she pulled me up. She didn't yell at me, but her body was stiff, her jaw clenched. I could feel her heart hammering through her hand. Later that night, she told my dad, "I don't like the way he looks at her. I don't like it one damn bit." Other neighbors. Not every neighbor was like that. Down the street lived a single mom, Mrs. Hill, with 2 boys who were always getting into trouble. I didn't know until later that their dad had left after coming out as gay. Then there was Miss Jean, an older woman with a black lab who'd slobber all over me while she laughed, and Miss Patty, who kept a garden so full of flowers it looked like a postcard. But at the Barlows' house there was no wandering, no exploring. My mom's rules were firm. You don't go past the driveway. You don't follow him anywhere. If I say come back, you come back. No questions. At 3 years old, I thought she was just being mean, but she was protecting me from something far worse. The girl. There was another girl I sometimes played with, Marcy. She lived a few blocks over with her mom and aunt. Her mom was overweight, missing most of her teeth, and seemed checked out. Always smoking, always tired. Marcy told me once, in the way kids blurt things out, "My mom lets me go over to Mr. Barlow's. He gives me candy." At the time, it didn't strike me as odd, but years later, when my mom told me what she suspected, my stomach dropped, because that's what he did. The revelation I didn't understand until I was older. I asked my mom one day, when we were driving past our old neighborhood, whatever happened to Mr. Barlow? Her knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. She stared straight ahead and said, "He died. And it's just as well. He was a bad man." I pressed her, the way kids do. "Bad like what?" Her jaw worked before she answered. "Bad in a way you don't need to understand yet. Just know I never trusted him around you, and I was right not to. It wasn't until I was much older that I learned the truth, that he had been accused, quietly whispered around town, of hurting children. That Marcy's mom let him live with them after his wife finally divorced him, that he kept doing what he'd always done. And Marcy never got a happy ending. Reflection. Looking back, I think about how easily things could have gone another way, if my mom hadn't had that instinct, if she hadn't yanked me back every time he tried to draw me in. She wasn't perfect, far from it. She was strict, sometimes harsh, and her temper could leave me in tears. But when it mattered most, she was the wall between me and a monster hiding in plain sight. I think about Marcy often, the little girl with tangled hair who deserved better, the way she never smiled quite the same after a certain summer. And I think about how evil doesn't always look like some stranger in a dark alley. Sometimes it looks like the quiet man across the street with a pocket full of candy and a smile that never reaches his eyes.
Story 5.
I never really understood what made a mother good until I started comparing mine to the ones I saw around me. When I was a kid, I thought all moms were like mine, sharp-tongued, unpredictable, quick to lash out and just as quick to demand a hug afterward. But as I got older, and I watched the way my friends' moms fussed over them, how they packed lunches with little notes, or showed up at school events without making a scene, I realized something was wrong in our house. My mother, Lorraine, was different, and not in a way you'd want to brag about. We lived in a low-income neighborhood in upstate New York, the kind of place where houses leaned sideways from years of neglect, where dogs barked all night, and where people sat out on porches with cigarettes and cheap beer, arguing about football or politics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. From the outside, our house looked ordinary, peeling paint, 2 steps missing on the porch, the smell of fried food seeping out the windows. But inside it was chaos. Lorraine ruled the house like a dictator. She didn't just want control, she wanted worship. If you made her laugh, she loved you. If you made her wait or contradicted her or, God forbid, embarrassed her in front of someone, she'd unleash hell. "Don't look at me like that," she'd snap if I so much as blinked the wrong way. "You think you're better than me? Huh? You little smart-ass." It was exhausting. By the time I turned 11, I'd figured out the safest way to survive was to stay quiet, stay useful, and stay invisible when I could. But then came February of 2009. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sky looks bruised purple and gray and you can smell snow coming even though the forecast swears it won't. School had just let out, and I was walking home with my backpack straps cutting into my shoulders. Normally the walk was maybe 8 minutes, 10 if I dragged my feet. But that day, I never made it home. Or at least, not in the way I should have. When I came around the corner onto our street, I noticed Mom's boyfriend, Rick, leaning against his beat-up Chevy in the driveway. He was smoking, squinting like the sun was too bright, even though it was late afternoon. "About time," he called when he saw me. His voice was like gravel, always rough, like someone who'd yelled too much in life. I hesitated because Rick wasn't supposed to be there. He usually worked late or claimed he did. "Your mom's looking for you," he said, flicking ash onto the pavement. "She's in a mood. Don't keep her waiting." That made my stomach twist. When Lorraine was in a mood, it usually meant yelling, throwing things, slamming doors. I nodded and walked up the steps, my sneakers crunching against salt scattered to melt the ice. Inside, the house was dim. The curtains were drawn, the TV was on low, and Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms folded. She had a cigarette burning in the ashtray in front of her, and a glass of cheap boxed wine half empty beside it. "You're late," she said flatly. I swallowed. "Only a couple minutes." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't sass me. You walk straight home, you hear me? Straight. None of this stopping to talk to friends or wandering around. You think I don't know what you're up to?" I didn't. "Shut up," she snapped. That was Lorraine in a nutshell. You couldn't win. I put my backpack down and sat quietly, hoping she'd let it drop. But instead, she gave me this long, unreadable look that made me shift in my chair. "You love me, don't you?" she asked suddenly. The question was so strange I didn't know what to say. Of course I loved her. She was my mom. But something about the way she asked it made me nervous. "Yes," I said softly. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good, 'cause I got a plan, and you're gonna help me." It started small. She told me not to worry, that it was just a little scheme to set us up right. She was tired of being broke, tired of living in what she called this dump of a town. She told me we were gonna be rich. "People are suckers for a sad story," she explained, dragging on her cigarette. "You just watch. They'll eat it up. And all you gotta do is play along." I didn't understand at first. But then she laid it out. I was going to go missing. Not for real, of course. At least that's what she promised. Just long enough to get people talking, to get the news involved, to get the reward money rolling in. "We'll be famous," she said, her eyes shining with a manic energy. "We'll be on TV, maybe even get a book deal. And when the money comes in, we split it. You'll thank me one day." I sat frozen in my chair, my heart pounding. "I don't want to," I whispered. Her face darkened instantly. "Don't want to," she hissed. "After everything I do for you. You ungrateful little brat." She slammed her hand on the table, making the ashtray jump. "You're gonna do what I say." End of story. I wanted to protest, but I knew better. So I nodded. And just like that, my nightmare began. The next afternoon, Lorraine sent me off to school like nothing was wrong. She even packed me a peanut butter sandwich, which she rarely did. I remember thinking maybe she'd changed her mind. But when the final bell rang, Rick was waiting outside the school gates. He smiled in that creepy, too-wide way he had and waved me over. "Your mom said I'm supposed to give you a ride," he said. I wanted to run, but I didn't, because I knew if I disobeyed, the punishment at home would be worse. So I climbed into his car. Instead of taking me home, he drove to a rundown duplex on the other side of town. The blinds were drawn, the yard was overgrown, and the whole place smelled like mildew when he unlocked the door. "Just hang out here a while," he said. "Your mom will explain later." And then he locked the door behind me. The first night, I sat on a stained mattress in the back bedroom, hugging my knees, trying not to cry. By the second day, I realized this wasn't going to be over quickly. Lorraine came by once, bringing me fast food, acting like this was all normal. "You're safe here," she said casually, setting down a bag of fries. "Don't make a fuss. People will be out there looking for you soon. You just sit tight." "Why can't I go home?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because," she said sharply, "that's not how the plan works. Don't you want us to be rich? Don't you want a better life?" I shook my head, tears running down my face. Her expression hardened. "You'll thank me later." Then she left, locking the door behind her. Meanwhile, outside, the whole town went crazy. Neighbors organized search parties. Flyers with my school picture plastered across them went up on telephone poles. The local news ran nightly segments about the missing girl and Lorraine. She played the grieving mother. On camera, she cried. She begged for my return. She clutched a teddy bear and talked about how scared she was. People ate it up. Donations started pouring in. Strangers handed her money on the street. Churches collected offerings. A local business put up a $10,000 reward. And all the while, I was sitting in that stinking room, hungry, scared, and alone.
Story 6.
I always thought the smell of rain on asphalt would remind me of home. Back then, when I was young, it meant my mom was in a good mood. She'd hum along to the radio, windows open, her long brown hair whipping in the wind as she drove us down those empty Michigan back roads. She'd say things like, "See, Ben, the Lord's washing the world clean again." It's funny how those same words echo in my head now, how something so tender turned into something so terrifying later in my life. My name's Benjamin Price, though everyone calls me Ben. I grew up in Hollow Creek, a sleepy little town outside Traverse City, Michigan. My mom's name was Eleanor Price. If you'd met her back in the day, you'd have sworn she was the picture of what a good Christian woman should be. She had that kind of comforting smile that made people talk to her in grocery store aisles. She baked pies for the neighbors, sang in the church choir, and always smelled faintly of vanilla and lavender lotion. But what no one knew, what I didn't understand until much later, was that behind that smile was something broken, something festering. When I was around 9, my dad walked out. He'd always been quiet, gentle, even, but something in him snapped. I remember one night, I heard them fighting in the kitchen. I peeked out from my bedroom door and saw him with his head in his hands while my mom screamed. She threw a coffee mug against the wall. All I caught before he left was him whispering, "You need help, Ellie. You're scaring him." She just stood there afterward, breathing heavy, shaking. Then she turned to me and said, "Your father doesn't believe in God anymore. That's why he's gone. We'll be fine without him." For years, I believed that. After he left, church became her world. She started spending hours reading scripture out loud, pacing around the house, her voice trembling. At first I thought she was just lonely, but then the prayers started getting strange. She'd stand over me at night, hands trembling, whispering things like, "The devil hides in innocence, Benny. We must stay pure. We must not let him in." I'd wake up and she'd still be there, eyes wide open, mouth moving silently. Sometimes she'd cry. Sometimes she'd smile. I didn't know which scared me more. By the time I turned 16, things got worse. She stopped working entirely, stopped leaving the house except for Sunday service. She said the world outside was infected. She'd talk about purity, sin, cleansing. If I stayed up too late watching TV, she'd unplug it and whisper, "Those pictures, they're how he gets in." If I didn't say grace before eating, she'd make me get down on my knees. Once, when she caught me talking to a girl from my school on the phone. She ripped the cord from the wall and said, "Do you want to end up like your father, chasing flesh while your soul rots?" The thing is, she wasn't always like that. Some days, she'd still make pancakes in the shape of smiley faces, kiss me on the forehead, and hum hymns while folding laundry. Those were the days I'd almost forget the darkness behind her eyes, but it always came back, like something was eating her from the inside out. After high school, I left Hollow Creek for good. I got into a small community college in Ohio. I remember the first night in my dorm room, quiet, warm, no footsteps outside my door, no muttering prayers under my breath just to sleep. I cried that night, not because I missed her, but because I realized how scared I'd been my whole life. I called her once a week, at first. She'd ask if I was praying, if I'd met any pure people. Her voice would crack when I told her I'd made friends. She'd say, "Be careful who you let near your spirit, Ben. Evil hides behind smiles." After a few months, I stopped calling. I told myself it was because of school. But the truth was, her voice made my stomach twist. 3 years later, I got the call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a calm voice said, "Mr. Price? This is Officer Randall from Hollow Creek PD. It's about your mother." My chest went cold. "She's okay," he added quickly. "But she's been hospitalized. She was found wandering barefoot on Route 12 at 2 in the morning. She told a passing truck driver she was walking toward the light. I didn't even pack a bag. I drove 6 hours straight back to Hollow Creek, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I got to the hospital, she was sitting up in bed, hair disheveled, eyes sunken. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. "Benny," she whispered when she saw me. Her voice still had that strange, trembling warmth. I hugged her, but her body felt stiff, like she didn't know what to do with affection anymore. "I was walking to him," she said, looking past me toward the ceiling. "He told me it's time to cleanse again." I heard him clear as day. I swallowed hard. "Mom, you scared everyone. You can't just..." He said, "They're coming for you." She cut me off. "You don't see it yet, but I do. You're not safe out there." The doctor came in soon after, a tired man with kind eyes. He told me she was suffering from severe psychosis, triggered by untreated depression and religious delusions. He recommended long-term psychiatric care, maybe even inpatient therapy. But when I told my mom that, she looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks and whispered, "You'd put your own mother in a cage?" I didn't have an answer. After her release, I stayed in Hollow Creek for a while. I found work at a small auto shop on Main Street. My mom seemed better. She'd take her meds, smile more, even started cooking again. I let myself believe she was healing, until the day I found her journal. It was lying open on the kitchen table, written in her neat handwriting. Most pages were prayers, but then I flipped to the last entry. "Benjamin is changing. I see it in his eyes. He's been touched by the world, by sin. I have to save him before it's too late. Before he takes him too." My throat tightened. That night, when I confronted her, she just stared at me, calm as ever, and said, "You'll understand soon, when the trumpet sounds." Weeks passed. She grew distant again. Neighbors started whispering that they heard her singing hymns outside at night. One morning, I woke up to find the backyard covered in burnt Bible pages. "Mom," I shouted, storming outside. "What the hell is this?" She looked up at me from the dirt, soot on her fingers. "I had to burn the lies," she said. "They changed his words. The real ones are still in my head." That's when I called Pastor Miller, the man who'd known her since I was a kid. He came over that evening, tried to talk to her, prayed with her, but she refused to look at him. "You don't hear him anymore either," she said quietly. "You've gone deaf to his truth." I could see fear flicker in the pastor's eyes before he left. The night everything broke started like any other. Rain tapping the windows, the hum of the old fridge, the smell of coffee burnt into the air. I'd just come home from work when I saw her standing in the kitchen, staring at the sink. The faucet was running, water overflowing. "Mom," I said softly. She turned to me slowly. Her eyes, those same warm brown eyes I grew up with, looked hollow now. "I filled it," she whispered, like he asked me to. "What are you talking about?" "The water. It washes away what's wrong." She smiled faintly. "He said we'll be clean again." My stomach dropped. "Mom, stop, please." But she didn't stop. She walked past me, muttering prayers under her breath. I followed her to the living room, and that's when I saw it. She'd placed every photo of me, childhood pictures, graduation, birthdays on the coffee table. All of them were slashed through with a knife. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Because I love you, Benny. Because I can't let the devil keep you." I grabbed her shoulders. "Mom, listen to me. You're sick. You need help." She slapped me hard across the face. For a second, the house went dead silent except for the ticking clock. "I won't let him have you," she said through clenched teeth. "I won't let him take what's mine." She rushed back toward the kitchen. I ran after her, but by the time I got there, she'd already filled the tub. The water was still running, steaming. She looked at me one last time and whispered, "Don't fight it. He'll make it quick." Then she grabbed me by the arm and tried to shove me toward the tub. I pushed her off instinctively, harder than I meant to. Her head hit the counter with a sickening crack. She collapsed, blood running down her temple. I froze. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of the water running. "Mom?" I whispered, dropping to my knees. She looked up at me weakly, blood pooling under her hair, and said, "You can't stop him." Then her eyes rolled back. I called 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. When the paramedics came, I just sat there on the kitchen floor, soaking wet, my mom's blood on my hands. She survived, but barely. They said she'd sustained a serious head injury, some brain swelling. She was declared legally incompetent and transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Lansing. I visited her twice. The first time, she didn't even recognize me. She sat there humming, her eyes darting around like she was seeing something I couldn't. The second time, she looked right at me and smiled. "You did it, Benny," she said. "You kept us pure." That was the last time I saw her. It's been 6 years now. I live in Detroit, work as a mechanic. I've got a wife, a little girl. We don't talk about my mother much. My wife knows the short version, that she was sick, that I took care of her. But sometimes, late at night, when my daughter's asleep and the house is quiet, I catch myself hearing the sound of running water. I'll walk into the bathroom and find the faucet dripping, even though I know I turned it off. And once, just once, I swear I heard someone humming outside my daughter's room. It was that same old hymn my mom used to sing when it rained. I told myself it was just my imagination, but when I looked out the window, the street was empty, just the soft sound of rain on asphalt, and somehow, it still smelled like home.
Story 7.
I never thought a single evening could rewrite the way I looked at my wife, at motherhood, even at myself. We lived in a quiet, mid-sized town in northern Indiana, the kind of place where people leave their porch lights on for the neighbors and every grocery clerk knows your name. Our home was a small, 2-bedroom ranch-style house, sitting near the edge of a wooded street, warm, lived in, filled with laughter most days, and arguments on the others. My name's Caleb Morris. I'm 33. I work nights at an auto parts warehouse, running deliveries and managing inventory. My wife, Tessa, stays home with our 2 daughters, Lily, who's 6, and Ava, who at that time was only 6 months old. We'd been struggling for a while, not financially, exactly, but emotionally. Ever since Ava was born, something in Tessa had changed. The brightness she once had dimmed, the patience, the humor, it all seemed to drain out of her. I chalked it up to exhaustion, postpartum stuff, stress, but there were days she'd just stare at nothing, like she wasn't really in the room with us. That night started so normal, so heartbreakingly normal. It was around 7 in the evening. I had just come home from a long shift, my back sore, my clothes smelling faintly of motor oil. Tessa was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with that blank look again, while Lily was sprawled out on the carpet watching cartoons. and Ava was cooing softly in her little bouncer. "Hey," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "Smells like takeout night?" Tessa didn't even glance up. "Didn't feel like cooking," she murmured. "There's leftover Thai in the fridge." I nodded, kissed the top of Lily's head. "You been good for Mom today?" She grinned. "Mom said I could have a popsicle before dinner." I gave Tessa a look. She finally raised her eyes from the phone, her expression flat. "It's just one popsicle, Caleb. She's fine." That was how it always went, these little frictions. Quiet, sharp. I tried to ignore it. I heated some noodles, sat down with Ava in my lap, rocking her gently while she gurgled and kicked. Lily sat beside me, unwrapping her bright red popsicle, humming along to some commercial jingle. Then she spotted a lemon on the counter. "Daddy, can I have some lemon?" she asked, pointing to it. "You're gonna eat that with your popsicle?" I laughed. "You'll regret it." But before I could stop her, she licked the lemon slice she'd picked up, puckering dramatically. "It's sour," she squealed, laughing. Tessa looked up suddenly, voice sharp. "Lily, don't eat that." "It's fine, Tess," I said gently. "She's just—" "No, I told you I don't want her eating that." The sudden tone froze me. Lily's face fell. "Sorry, Mommy." I tried to smooth it over. Hey, it's okay. Let's just get you some water, huh?" But Lily frowned. "I want milk." I shook my head. "Milk after lemon, sweetheart. That's gonna mess your tummy up." "Please?" she begged. Tessa snapped. "Fine. Let her learn." I hesitated, but poured her a small cup of milk anyway. She drank it down fast, smiling. Then, almost instantly, her smile broke. "Daddy," she said softly, her little hand pressing to her stomach. "My tummy hurts." I set Ava down in her carrier. "Hey, it's okay. Just take it slow." And then she puked. Not a little spit-up violent. Sudden. All over my shirt, my lap, the couch cushions. The smell hit instantly. I jumped to my feet without thinking. Instinct kicking in to get her off me, and that's when I realized I'd made the worst possible move. Ava, who'd been resting in my lap just seconds before, slipped off as I stood up. I heard a dull thunk and then a sharp cry. My blood went cold. Oh God, Ava. I dropped to my knees, my heart slamming against my ribs. She was wailing, and when I lifted her, I saw it, blood pooling near her eye, spreading fast, bright red against her tiny skin. "Tessa, get the keys, now!" I screamed, but she didn't move. She just sat there, staring. "Tessa!" I yelled again, my voice cracking. Her eyes flicked to me slow, unfocused. "You dropped her?" "It was an accident." "She's bleeding. For God's sake, move." Finally, she stood, her chair scraping the floor, and we rushed to the car. Ava's cries were still piercing my ears as I strapped her into her seat. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely buckle the clip. The drive to the hospital was chaos. Lily was sobbing in the back seat, terrified, while Tessa sat stone-faced in the passenger seat, clutching Ava but saying nothing. "Talk to me," I snapped. "Is she still bleeding?" Tessa looked down, then whispered, "You don't deserve to hold her again." What the hell are you talking about?" "You dropped our baby, Caleb," she said, her voice icy. "You dropped her." I wanted to scream, to argue, but the siren of panic in my chest drowned everything else out. At the ER, the nurse rushed Ava into triage immediately. The blood looked worse than it was a small cut right above her eye that had streamed downward, pooling across the surface. It had looked like her eye was bleeding. When the doctor told us she was fine, just needed a few stitches, my knees nearly gave out. I remember laughing half in relief, half in disbelief while Tessa just stood there, unmoving. "She's okay," I said, smiling at Tessa, waiting for some sign of shared relief. But she didn't smile. She didn't even look at me. On the way home, the silence was unbearable. Lily had fallen asleep, her little head against the window. I kept glancing at Tessa in the passenger seat, her face ghostly in the dashboard light, jaw tight. "I'm sorry." I said finally. I panicked. You panicked, she repeated flatly. And she paid for it. That's not fair, Tess. I was holding both of them. She threw up on me. I reacted. You always react, she snapped. You never think. That cut deeper than I'd admit. We pulled into the driveway, and as I parked, she turned to me, eyes red but voice eerily calm. I think you should sleep on the couch tonight. I stared at her. You serious? I don't want you near her right now. I almost said something cruel, something I'd regret, but the exhaustion swallowed it. I just nodded, got out, and went inside quietly. That was the night everything really changed. In the days that followed, Tessa became distant in a different way, cold, controlled. She'd move through the house like a ghost, tending to the baby with mechanical precision but barely looking at me. Whenever I tried to help, she'd say, I've got it. One night, I came home early and found her standing over Ava's crib, just staring down, whispering something I couldn't make out. Tess? She jerked upright, startled. Don't sneak up on me like that. What were you saying? Nothing, she said quickly, just humming to her. But she wasn't humming. I know what humming sounds like. And then I started noticing other things, the baby monitor clicking on by itself, the sound of someone whispering over it when Tessa was asleep next to me. Or I thought she was asleep. I'd check the monitor, and the whispering would stop. But the next day, I'd hear her in Ava's room again, voice low, saying things like, You don't need him. Mommy keeps you safe. At first, I thought I was going insane. Then Lily started saying things. Mommy told me Daddy makes bad choices, she said one morning over cereal. I froze. When did she say that? Last night, Lily said. She said if Daddy hurts Ava again, we might have to go away. I confronted Tessa that evening, trying to stay calm. Why are you saying stuff like that to Lily? She looked at me blankly. What are you talking about? You told her I hurt the baby. Well, didn't you? She cut in, her tone sharp, deliberate. That was an accident, Tessa. Her expression barely changed. Accidents happen when people aren't careful. Something in her eyes made my stomach twist. It wasn't anger, it was certainty. Like she'd already decided what I was, and nothing I said would ever change it. Weeks went by. The tension curdled into something darker. I stopped sleeping much, half afraid to leave Ava alone with her. But I couldn't prove anything, not yet. Then one night, I woke up to a noise, a faint scraping, like something being dragged. I slipped out of bed and followed the sound down the hall to Ava's room. The light was on. Tessa was standing over the crib again, her hand resting on the rail. Ava was wide awake, whimpering softly. Tessa, I whispered. She didn't move. What are you doing? She slowly turned her head toward me, her eyes hollow, her face pale in the nursery light. She almost stopped breathing, she said quietly. When you dropped her that night, did you know that? My heart thudded. That's not true, she never stopped breathing. She almost did, she said again. And you didn't even notice. I had to save her. Tessa, that's not what happened, please. She tilted her head. You shouldn't be here. What? She doesn't sleep well when you're here. She senses it. What are you talking about? I took a step forward. She knows. I froze. And then I saw at her hand, hovering near Ava's face. Her thumb pressed just under the baby's nose. I lunged forward, shoving her back. What the hell are you doing? Tessa stumbled, hitting the wall, eyes blazing. I was checking her breathing. You were checking her breathing, she screamed. Ava started crying, and that was it. I grabbed her and backed away. You need help, I said, shaking. You need serious help. She glared at me, her voice dropping low. You're the one who needs help, Caleb. You're the dangerous one. The next day, she took the kids and went to her sister's place. It's been 3 months since then. I see my daughters on weekends, supervised visits. Tessa filed for separation, said I was unfit. The court believed her. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear the monitor clicks, the phantom whispers. I tell myself it's just in my head, but every now and then, when I pick Ava up, she flinches just for a second, and Lily asks me why Mommy says I almost killed her sister. I tell her that's not true, that Daddy loves them more than anything. But sometimes, I see the way Tessa looks at me during drop-offs, calm, collected, a faint, satisfied smile, and I start to wonder if maybe the real danger wasn't what happened that night, but what she's capable of believing now, because she's convinced herself I'm the monster, and maybe that's all it takes to become one.
Story 8.
I never thought being a mom would change me in the ways it did. Everyone tells you it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience, and they're right, but nobody warns you about how much fear comes with that love. It's like the more you love them, the more you realize just how fragile everything is. Before I became a mother, I used to be calm, logical. I worked as a nurse in Des Moines, Iowa. Night shifts, double shifts, the works. Nothing rattled me. I'd seen blood. I'd seen death. I'd seen kids in the ER with injuries that broke my heart, but I could always compartmentalize it. Then I had my sons. Jack was 4 when this started. His little brother, Eli, was 2. Their dad, Ben, worked construction and was gone most of the day, sometimes out of town for jobs. So most of the parenting fell to me. I didn't mind, I loved being home with them. Our days were filled with peanut butter sandwiches, toy trucks, and sticky hands grabbing my cheeks for kisses. It was chaotic and sweet, but I remember the first time I felt that other kind of feeling. The one I can't even fully name. It wasn't just fear. It was like standing on the edge of something dark and bottomless. It all began one Sunday afternoon. The boys had a pet goldfish named Sunny. I bought it from a Walmart near our house because Jack begged me for something alive. It was supposed to teach him responsibility. I didn't expect it to live long, but somehow Sunny made it 6 months, which, for a fish, felt like a record. That day, while I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard Jack shout from the kitchen, "Mom, Sunny's not moving." I walked over and saw the little orange body floating belly up in the tank. Eli stood beside him, clutching a cracker, staring at it with a confused expression. I sighed softly. "Yeah, honey, I think Sunny's gone." Jack looked up at me, his blue eyes wide. "Gone where?" I knelt beside him. "Well, baby, sometimes pets die. Their bodies stop working, and they go to sleep forever." He blinked a few times. "Like people?" I hesitated. "Yeah, like people. Everyone dies someday." He just stared at me for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Even you?" That question had hit me harder than it should have. My throat tightened. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and forced a smile. "Yeah, someday. But not for a long, long time, okay?" He kept looking at me, dead serious. "Good. Good." I froze. "What? Good?" he repeated, turning away to grab a spoon from the drawer. He didn't even look back at me as he said it. I stood there for a moment, feeling my pulse thudding in my ears. I told myself it was just a weird kid thing. Kids say creepy stuff all the time. But there was no humor in his tone, no smile. Just that flat, matter-of-fact delivery. That night after Ben came home, I told him about it. He laughed. "You're overthinking it, Liv. He's 4. He doesn't understand what he's saying." "Yeah, maybe," I said. But something about the way Jack looked at me still sat wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find him standing beside my bed. I didn't hear him come in. He was just there. His little face was an inch from mine. "Mommy," he whispered, "can I see what you look like when you're dead?" My stomach dropped. "What?" He tilted his head. "I want to see if you look like Sunny. Maybe if you lay really still and close your eyes." I sat up quickly. "Jack, that's not funny." He blinked at me, his face totally blank. "I'm not joking. Go back to bed." He didn't move. "When you die, can I keep your eyes?" That time, my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "Jack, stop it right now." He flinched a little, then just quietly turned and walked out. I sat there shaking. My hands actually trembled. I told Ben about it again later that day, but he just shrugged. "He's just curious, Liv. He's learning about death. You're making it weird. Maybe I was. Maybe I was being dramatic. Until things got worse. A few nights later, I was in the kitchen doing dishes when I heard the boys whispering in their room. Eli was giggling, but Jack's voice was low and deliberate. I paused and leaned closer to the hallway. Jack said, "No, not yet. Mommy's not ready." I stepped into the hall. "What's not ready, sweetie?" They both froze. Eli had his stuffed bear clutched to his chest. Jack turned slowly toward me, his face half in shadow. "The hole," he said softly. "What hole?" "The one under the house, the one I made." I laughed nervously. "There's no hole under the house, baby." "Yes, there is," he said. "You can't see it 'cause it's for after." "After what?" I asked, forcing a smile. He didn't answer. He just smiled back, a tight, strange smile that made my chest ache with something I didn't understand. That night, after they were asleep, I went outside with a flashlight and crouched near the crawl space. The house was old, the kind that creaks when the wind blows. I didn't expect to find anything, but when I shone the light under the foundation, my stomach turned over. There was a small pile of dirt, freshly dug. I didn't sleep that night. Over the next week, Jack's behavior changed. He'd sit in the living room staring at the wall for long stretches of time. Sometimes he'd whisper things I couldn't make out. Other times, he'd draw pictures, scribbles of red and black with stick figures lying on their sides. When I asked him what they were, he said, "They're for practice." "For what?" "For when you go away." I tried to take the crayons away once, and he screamed so loud the neighbors must have heard. It wasn't a tantrum cry, it was angry. Adult angry. That night, Eli came running into our room crying. Jack said he's gonna make me sleep forever. Ben finally got mad then. He stormed into the boys' room and shouted, "Jack, what the hell's gotten into you?" Jack didn't even flinch. He just looked at him and said, "You should be nicer. You're next." After that, Ben didn't sleep much either. He started locking the boys' door at night from the outside. I hated that. It felt cruel. But after I found the dead bird in the kitchen, its head missing, I understood. Jack said he wanted to see how it worked inside. We took him to a child psychologist. She said he was bright. Maybe too bright. "He's testing boundaries," she said, "processing concepts of life and death." But no amount of therapy could explain the things that kept happening. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the baby monitor hissing softly. Then I heard Jack's voice. "Don't worry, Mommy. I'll take care of it when you're done sleeping." I froze. The monitor wasn't in my room anymore. It was in his. When I crept to their door, it was open. Both boys were standing in the middle of the room. Jack was holding Eli's hand, whispering something in his ear. When he saw me, he smiled. "It's okay, Mommy." I made the hole bigger. That was it. I grabbed both kids and drove to my sister's house at 2:30 inches the morning. Ben came the next day, furious. "You can't just run off in the middle of the night." He's our son, but even he couldn't explain the whispering, the drawings, the hole. We moved 2 months later to a new house across town. New school, new everything. Jack seemed to calm down for a while. I thought maybe we were in the clear. Until last week. I was folding laundry in the living room when he came up behind me quietly. I didn't hear him until he spoke. "Hey, Mommy." "Yeah, honey?" He smiled, that same empty little smile. "You remember Sonny?" "Of course I do." His eyes brightened. "I figured it out. When people die, they go in the hole, right?" My stomach turned. "Jack, I think you're ready now," he said softly. Then he walked away, humming. Last night I found dirt on the kitchen floor, a trail of it, leading to the back door. I went outside with a flashlight again. The ground under the porch was dug up, deeper this time. And there, half buried in the dirt, was one of Eli's stuffed animals, its head neatly torn off. I'm writing this in my car right now. The boys are asleep in the back seat. I told them we're going to Grandma's house. But when I looked in the rearview mirror just now, Jack was staring at me through the darkness, his eyes wide and unblinking, and he whispered something I could barely hear. "It's okay, Mommy. I'll help you when it's time." I don't know if I should keep driving or if I should finally stop and look at what's in that hole.
Story 9.
I was 8 years old the first time I realized something was deeply wrong with my mother. Not in the usual sense. She wasn't drunk or violent or even particularly cruel. At least, not in ways people could see. She was the kind of person who made you question whether the problem was really her or if it was you. Subtle things, tones, glances, the way she'd say, "Are you sure that's what happened?" And after I told her something she didn't like. She didn't have to scream or hit to make me feel small. She had a way of rewriting memories until I doubted my own head. We lived in a small blue house in rural Ohio, just off a quiet road surrounded by fields that smelled like mud and gasoline after the rain. My dad worked the late shift at the paper mill, so most nights it was just me and Mom. She'd sit in her chair in the living room, chain-smoking menthols and watching her shows, barely looking up when I passed through. But the night the toy box came home, everything changed. Dad pulled into the driveway in his old Ford, headlights cutting through the thin fog that rolled in from the cornfields. I remember peeking out the window, my little palms pressed to the cold glass. He had this huge cardboard box in his arms, taped up and scuffed, like it had been sitting in someone's garage for years. When he came inside, Mom was at the kitchen table, thumbing through a stack of bills. "Don't track mud in," she said without looking up. Dad set the box down. "Got something for the kid," he said with that tired grin he always wore after a 12-hour shift. Yard sale over in Logan. They were letting folks take what they wanted for next to nothing. I tore into the box before he even finished talking. Inside was a mix of old toys, plastic dinosaurs, some wooden blocks, a couple of model cars, and one thing that instantly grabbed me, a small red fort made of heavy plastic. Maybe from some medieval playset. "Sweet, right?" Dad said. "Figured you'd get a kick out of those." Mom finally looked up, her eyes flicking between me and the box. "We don't need more junk in the house," she said flatly. Dad shrugged. "He's a kid, Nancy, let him play." I didn't care what they said. That fort was mine. I remember the weight of it, the way the tiny drawbridge clicked when I moved it up and down. I played with it every day, set it on the living room carpet, and made little armies out of the action figures I already had. But I wasn't really playing alone. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, like all kids have. I'd talk to my toys, make up stories, and sometimes it almost felt like something or someone was talking back. I can still hear it. Faint and breathy. "Don't move him there. He's supposed to guard the gate." The first time I heard that, I froze. It wasn't my dad's voice. It wasn't Mom's either. I whispered, "Who said that?" No answer. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That night, while I was brushing my teeth, Mom called me into the hallway. "Who were you talking to earlier?" I swallowed. "Myself." She stared at me a moment, her eyes sharp like she didn't believe it. "Don't lie to me." "I wasn't," I said quickly. "I was just pretending." She sighed and rubbed her temple. "You always were a weird kid," she muttered before walking away. The next few days, things got stranger. Toys started moving. I'd leave the fort set up in the living room and come back to find one of the little figures standing on the roof when I knew I hadn't put it there. I tried to tell Mom, but she just gave me that same thin smile. "Maybe you forgot," she said. "Kids do that." But I didn't forget. One afternoon, I was lying on the carpet next to the fort when I felt something cold on my hand, like a finger brushing against it. I jerked back, and the figure I'd been holding clattered to the floor. Then I heard it again. Soft but close this time. "You shouldn't have my fort." The voice wasn't angry. It sounded sad. I looked around. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, I ran straight to Mom. She was standing by the sink, washing dishes. "Mom, there's a kid in the living room." She didn't even turn around. "Oh, stop it, Ben. There's no kid." "I heard him." "Enough," she said sharply, slamming a plate down hard enough to make me jump. "Don't start making things up just because you want attention." I wanted to tell her I wasn't making it up, but the look in her eyes told me not to. It was the look she got before she said something cruel, the kind that stuck with you longer than any punishment. That night, I couldn't sleep. I could hear whispers coming from the hallway, faint, hushed tones like someone having a conversation in another room. "Please," a small voice said, then silence. When I woke up the next morning, the fort was gone. I ran to the living room and found the box of toys missing. Mom was sitting at the table with her coffee. "Where's my fort?" She didn't even look at me. "Your dad threw that junk out." "Why?" "Because I told him to. You were getting obsessed." "I wasn't," I cried. "It was mine." She slammed her cup down, coffee splashing onto the table. "Don't you dare raise your voice to me." I backed away, trembling. I could feel something tight in my chest, a sadness that didn't feel like it belonged to me. After that day, Dad and Mom fought constantly. I didn't know it at the time, but later I'd find out it was about the toys. Mom wanted them gone, said they gave her a bad feeling. Dad said I was just a kid and needed something to play with. But then one night, Dad came home late. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. Mom asked, "What happened?" He just said, "We can't keep that stuff. Not after what I heard." That was the last time he ever brought home anything from a garage sale. Years later, when I was in my 20s, Mom and I barely spoke. Dad had passed away from a heart attack when I was 16, and she moved into a small apartment in Columbus. I avoided her calls most of the time. When I did answer, it was the same guilt trips as always, how I never visited, how I didn't care about family anymore. Then, one night, she called me crying. I could count on one hand how many times I'd heard her cry. "Ben," she said between gasps, "I need to tell you something. About those toys. I hadn't thought about them in years." "What are you talking about?" She sniffled. "Your father lied to me. He said that box came from a yard sale, but he went back there later. He talked to the woman running it. She told him why they were selling everything so cheap." Her voice trembled. "The family who lived there before there was a murder. The husband shot his wife, her lover, and then their little boy, in his room, right next to where they found that toy box." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The static on the phone filled the silence between us. "That's why your father threw them out," she said. "He didn't want you playing with something that belonged to a dead kid." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to tell her ghosts weren't real, but something about her voice made me feel like I was 8 again, standing in that living room, listening to whispers no one else could hear. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. "Because..." She took a deep breath. "Sometimes at night, I hear him too." I sat up. "What?" "The boy," she whispered. "He says he wants his fort back." I didn't sleep that night. A few months later, Mom passed away in her sleep. Heart failure, they said. I went to her apartment to pack up her things. It was strange being there, so quiet, so sterile. No smoke, no clutter, no sound but the hum of the old refrigerator. While going through her closet, I found an old cardboard box on the top shelf. I pulled it down and froze. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was the red fort. I sat there for a long time, just staring at it. It looked smaller than I remembered, faded and dusty, but still solid. My fingers brushed over the little drawbridge, and it clicked open with the same sound I'd never forgotten. Then I heard it. "Hi." I turned around so fast I nearly fell. No one was there. My heart pounded. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, faintly, "Can I have it back now?" I dropped the fort and stumbled back. My breath came in short bursts. The air felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. I backed toward the door, but something made me stop. I turned and looked at the box again. There, in the thin layer of dust on the fort's roof, were tiny fingerprints. I packed up the apartment as fast as I could. I didn't take the fort. I left it sitting on the floor, the drawbridge open like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever came next. That was 5 years ago. I have a daughter now, Sophie. She's 7, with my eyes and my mom's stubborn streak. I promised myself I'd never be like her. Never cold, never manipulative. I'd let my kid laugh, play, be curious. Last week, my wife came home with a box of secondhand toys she picked up at a church sale. Sophie was thrilled, dumping them out all over the living room floor. And right there, sitting in the middle of the pile, was a small red fort. I swear to God, my heart stopped. I asked my wife where she got it. She said, some lady was cleaning out her late mother's stuff. Why? Why? I couldn't answer. That night, Sophie set up the fort on the carpet, just like I used to. She made up stories, talking to herself as she moved little figures around. Only, she wasn't talking to herself. When I passed by her door, I heard her whisper, I know, I'll guard the gate for you. I froze. Sophie, I said gently, stepping in. Who are you talking to, sweetheart? She looked up at me with that innocent smile. The boy who used to have this fort. My stomach dropped. What boy? She giggled. He says his name is Alex. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing faint creaks in the hallway, the soft patter of small feet that weren't there. Around 2 a.m., I got up to check on Sophie. Her door was half open. She was sitting up in bed, facing the corner. Sweetie, I whispered. She didn't turn around. He's sad, she said quietly. He doesn't like that you threw his toys away. My throat went dry. Sophie, who told you that? Her small shoulders trembled. Alex did. I felt cold all over. I forced myself to smile. Okay, honey, time to go to sleep, all right? We'll talk about it in the morning. She nodded, still facing the corner. He says you can hear him too. I left the room and shut the door gently. I didn't sleep. The next morning, when I went to wake her up, the fort was gone. Her toys were scattered across the floor, but the fort gone. I tore through the living room, the kitchen, even checked outside. Nothing. When Sophie woke up, I asked her what happened. She rubbed her eyes and said, Alex took it. He said it was time to go home. I stared at her. What does that mean? She just smiled. He said, you'll see. That night, I sat alone in the living room, trying to convince myself it was all just some elaborate coincidence. But then I heard the sound. A faint click, the sound of a plastic drawbridge lowering. It came from the hallway, and when I looked toward Sophie's room, I saw it. A faint red glow spilling out from under her door. I didn't go in. I just sat there, staring, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. In that moment, I realized something. My mother wasn't crazy. She wasn't toxic because she lied. She was toxic because she knew. She'd seen the same thing I was seeing now, and instead of warning me, she buried it, made me feel insane for ever noticing it. And now, it had found my daughter. That was 2 nights ago. Sophie hasn't spoken much since. She sits by her window, humming quietly. Yesterday, I found her talking to someone again. I listened from the hall. She said, It's okay, Alex. Daddy says we can keep it this time. But I hadn't said that. I don't know what to do anymore. My wife doesn't believe me. She says I'm stressed, overworked, imagining things. But I know what I saw. Sometimes at night, I can hear the faint sound of children laughing from the hallway, soft and distant, like an old recording. And every now and then, when I walk past Sophie's room, I swear I can hear a small voice whisper from the dark. Thanks for giving it back.
Story 10.
I never thought becoming a mother the second time would shake me to my core. I was 31 when I found out I was pregnant again. My husband, Ryan, nearly cried when I told him. Our daughter, Lila, who had just turned 5, was over the moon at first, hugging my belly, asking if the baby could hear her, saying she couldn't wait to teach him how to be nice. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Eugene, Oregon. It was cozy, old but warm, with creaky floorboards and a front porch that smelled like cedar after it rained. We had a cat named Mittens, a scruffy gray rescue who'd been with us since before Lila was born. She adored that cat, slept with him, fed him treats when she thought we weren't watching, even tried to dress him up in her doll's clothes. Mittens tolerated it barely, but about a week before my due date, Mittens started acting strange, hiding under the bed, refusing food, meowing in that low, gut-deep way animals do when something's wrong. The vet said it was a nasty internal infection, something that had spread too far. He was suffering. I remember holding Lila in my arms at the clinic while Ryan did what had to be done. She didn't cry until she saw me cry. That night, she slept in our bed, her small hand clutching my arm. "Mommy," she whispered into the dark. "He's not gonna wake up anymore, right?" I said no. "Then where did he go?" I told her I didn't know for sure, but maybe somewhere warm, somewhere where cats could nap forever. The next morning she seemed okay. Kids bounce back faster than we expect, I guess. Over breakfast she said, "It's okay, Mommy. When the baby comes, we can get a new kitty. One that likes pink ribbons." Ryan chuckled, relieved, and promised her we'd get one as soon as things calmed down. She nodded, satisfied. That's how life goes with kids' grief one day, pancakes and giggles the next. Then, a week later, our son Eli was born. The labor was quick, messy, emotional. Ryan was right there holding my hand through every scream. Lila was staying with my sister during it all, and when she finally came to the hospital to meet her baby brother, she looked serious, almost solemn. She peered into the bundle in my arms and said softly, "He's really small." "Yeah," Ryan said, smiling. "He's still getting used to the world." She tilted her head. "He doesn't look ready." We laughed, but I remember the tone in her voice. It wasn't mocking or cute. It was observant. The way adults sound when they're talking about something bigger than they should understand. We brought Eli home 2 days later. Those first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and baby cries. Lila adjusted fast, though. She'd bring me diapers, sing lullabies to him, even shush me if I walked too loudly while he was sleeping. Then one afternoon, while I was nursing him in the living room, Lila came up to me with her usual matter-of-fact tone. "Mommy," she asked, "is Charlie going to die like Mittens did?" It threw me off so bad I laughed at first, thinking she'd just mixed up the names. "Sweetheart, who's Charlie?" She pointed at Eli. "Your brother's name is Eli, baby." She frowned. "No, I call him Charlie. That's his name where he came from." I froze. "Where he came from?" I repeated. She shrugged. "Before he came here. You know, before you brought him home." I tried to brush it off, told her gently that his name was Eli and that everyone, yes, eventually dies, but not for a long, long time. Lila's eyes lit up like I'd said the most wonderful thing. "Good," she said, smiling. "Then I can keep him longer this time." I didn't know what to say. I chalked it up to grief, confusion, kids blending things together in their heads. But that night, while rocking Eli back to sleep, I couldn't shake her words. Keep him longer this time. The next few months passed without much weirdness. I was exhausted, juggling 2 kids, postpartum hormones, and the endless laundry that somehow doubled overnight. Lila seemed to adore Eli, always wanting to feed him, tickle his feet, or sit beside him during naps. Then one morning, when Eli was about 6 months old, I woke to the sound of him laughing from his crib. I smiled until I realized Lila's voice was in there too. I peeked in quietly and froze. She was standing over him, whispering something I couldn't make out. Her tone was low, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. "What are you saying, honey?" I asked, forcing a smile. She looked up. "I'm talking to Charlie." There it was again, that name. "His name is Eli," I said gently, lifting him from the crib. She just smiled and said, "He doesn't mind." After that, she stopped calling him Eli completely. To her, he was Charlie. She'd even correct Ryan and me if we slipped up. One night, Ryan joked, "Maybe Charlie was her imaginary friend and now she thinks he's the baby." I laughed, but deep down, I didn't find it funny. Something about it didn't feel imaginary. When Eli turned 6, the weirdness got worse. He was bright, kind, but quiet. He'd sit in his room and draw for hours, mostly dark scribbles, shapes that didn't make sense, circles within circles. Lila was 11 by then, and though they were close, I caught her whispering to him sometimes in the same strange, hushed tone from years ago. Then, one evening, while I was folding laundry, Eli sat down beside me and asked, "Mom, can you see things through the black circles in my eyes?" I smiled faintly, thinking it was just one of his odd questions. "No, honey, I can't see through your pupils." He looked unsatisfied. "But you can see what I see, right? Like, in my head?" I stopped folding. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head. "You said when I was a baby, you always knew when I was crying. You said you could feel it, so I thought maybe you can still feel what's inside me." I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or call a therapist. "No, sweetheart," I said carefully. "I can't see inside your head. Only you can." He frowned, like that was the wrong answer. "Then how do you know what he wants?" he asked. "Who?" He didn't answer. He just smiled and said, "Never mind," before walking off to his room. That night, I found Lila sitting outside his door. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked pale. "He's talking to Charlie again." I froze. "What do you mean again?" She looked down. "He says Charlie lives behind his eyes. He said, when he sleeps, Charlie gets to look out." I felt my chest go tight. "Lila, who is Charlie?" Her eyes welled up. "He's the baby I had before Eli came. He didn't make it. He was mine first." My throat closed up. "What are you talking about?" But she just started crying, shaking, saying she didn't want Charlie to come back because he's different now. Ryan brushed it off as overactive imagination. But over the next few weeks, Eli started saying things that made it impossible to ignore. Once, he looked at Lila during dinner and said, "Charlie says you shouldn't have told." Lila's fork clattered to the floor. Another time I caught him standing in front of the hallway mirror whispering, "I can see you now." After that, he refused to sleep unless his door was open, and every night, Lila would drag her blanket into the hall and sleep outside his room, as if guarding it. I took him to a child psychologist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Harmon. She said his questions about the eyes and seeing what others see were normal signs of a still-forming self-identity. I wanted to believe that. But then came the night I'll never forget. I woke to a sound, a soft tapping. It was coming from the baby monitor we'd repurposed to listen for nightmares or calls for help. Except now, it wasn't picking up sound from Eli's room. It was static, interrupted by faint whispers. I turned up the volume. "A boy's voice," she told. "Now I can look." I rushed to Eli's room. The nightlight was on. Eli was sitting upright in bed, eyes open but completely black. No whites, just darkness. Lila was at the doorway, sobbing. "Mom," she choked out. "It's not him." I grabbed Eli, shaking him. "Eli, wake up." He blinked, and just like that, the blackness was gone. He started crying, terrified, asking what was wrong. Lila was inconsolable for days. She wouldn't go near him. Said she could still see Charlie looking through his eyes sometimes. We moved a few months later, hoping a change of scenery might help. But even now, years later, sometimes Eli still asks me strange things. Last week, out of nowhere, he said, "Mom, when I sleep, do you see what I see?" I told him no. He smiled softly, the same way Lila did all those years ago, and said, "Good, then you won't have to see him." That night, I dreamed of a gray cat curled beside a crib. Its eyes were missing, just two black circles staring up at me. And from the crib, a small voice whispered, "You can keep me longer this time."